Welcome to the Pathways to Profitability podcast, personal tales of business success. Are you feeling stuck improving your profitability? Learn from fractional business professionals how their services move your profitability needle. Here's your host, Cheryl Mucha, CEO of CFO Your Way.
Hello, and thank you so much for joining us today on our episode of Pathways to Profitability. My guest today is Rick Maher of Turning Point HCM. Rick, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you, Cheryl. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's always exciting to talk to you. So thank you.
Thanks. So I like to start, just give the audience a little bit about who Rick is.
Yeah. So just to highlight it in one word, Rick is a contrarian and always has been, and probably always will be. So my business is Turning Point Human Capital Management, and we're a fractional HR firm, and our mission is to release that pressure valve that builds in small business owners when those day-to-day HR issues pop up. So just as a reference, before we really get into it, we've worked with over 2,000 businesses across the country, 65 different industries in 49 different states. So our mission, as I said, is to help all those small businesses out there that are struggling with those day-to-day HR issues.
So that's your superpower, right? To just solve those issues, relieve that pressure, and just make the business a well-oiled machine from an HR perspective.
Yeah, you think about it, humans, all of us, right? We have these two amazing powers to use to stay on the theme of superpowers. We have the absolute ability to make tremendous mistakes, right? But unlike other capital equipment, we have the absolute autonomy and skill to fix those mistakes. So it's a very unique component of a business. And although most businesses have very unique problems to them, most human capital problems are happen in most businesses. So the skill, the understanding, and the expertise to deal with those problems are things that we kind of see every day across all kinds of businesses and all kinds of industries.
Would you agree that the human capital part of a business is the hardest part of running a business? Like I always say, business entrepreneurs start a business because they know their thing, their widget, their product or their service. And they go into business all gung-ho, they get the sales and marketing, they're growing. And then it comes to that first hire. And it's like, oh no, now what?
Yeah, well, if you think about almost every small business, right, the person who starts that business has a very specific skill, right? That's why they do it, right?
Right.
But most folks have never had that training, skill, background, or ownership of how do I build, lead, manage a team, right? And so, just the natural progression of most small businesses is the first step is they hire someone who's just going to be a part-time, do some things around the office kind of a person, right? And it's usually someone they know. If it's not a family member, it's someone who's close to them. So it's easy to just say, take care of this, do this, right? And they don't build processes from the very beginning, right? And so what happens is that Band-Aid, if you will, they keep building upon that Band-Aid and throwing more Band-Aids on top of it till it gets to a point as they continue to grow. Let's say, 5, 7, 10 people. Everything is coming out of the leader's head and it's just a mishmash of things. And it almost starts to crumble on its own weight. So what most business leaders have to learn early on is I need to think strategically about all these positions in my company and how I'm going to structure them. Otherwise, to use a property rights term, if I own the fence between my neighbor's yard and it breaks and I own the fence, I'm going to fix it. Right. If he owns it or she owns it, they're going to fix it. If no one owns it, we both look at it and say, I'm not going to fix it. So there's that natural, if there's no delineation with the employee base and the job titles and structures, then no one owns the property rights and nothing gets done properly.
Right. So I love that you said like business owners start with the people they know to support them, right? At what point in the growth and expansion of the business is it time for them to reach out to Rick and say, help?
Early, right? I mean, just using that analogy of band-aiding and building,
Right,
when I would say when they get to the first person who doesn't have the same last name as them, right? That's kind of the beginnings of these people. They're here for a job. They
right,
may or may not yet buy into the mission, right? Whereas if someone has my last name, odds are they're really supportive of the things that are on. I would argue that even at that point, that's where some things should happen, but that's not always the case, and that's understandable. But when that first real ad goes out, and there's going to be a real that first person again that doesn't have the same last name or is their friend's daughter's son's cousin kind of a thing, that's when it really needs to start to happen, because that person who comes in may not share the same
right.
beliefs and culture and mission and vision and values and all that sort of stuff.
Right. And I always talk about, like, with our services too, it's building the foundation, right? You need that strong foundation. And once it's built, it's maintenance. And
Yeah,
as you add additional, it's incorporating them into that foundation.
yeah, and at every level, I mean, we say these words all day long: process, procedure, documentation, right? Look at any big business, any large company that we deal with every day, right? Stuff shows up at our front door every day
Right,
from
right,
places around the world. That's all procedure, process, and documentation, right? And replicable, so that, right, from a profitability standpoint, if the person just has to follow the procedures, that's a different skill set than someone has to think all the time about
right,
the procedures, right? And so from a scalability and a profitability standpoint, those processes and procedures should start very early on. And I would say for most small business owners, when as soon as that first person that doesn't have the same last name comes on board, that's where
right.
it should really start.
Yeah. And to deal with the legal issues too. I mean, there's so much surrounding HR that is, you have to walk that fine line, and the documentation is so critical.
Yeah, and I think to bring that upstream a little bit, what we're talking about is freedom, right? For the clients that we work with. So, and I don't mean waving flags and flying eagles. What I mean is that freedom from the problems of their business, so they can focus on what they want to focus on. Because human capital is so complex, not just from a legal standpoint, right, or a compliance standpoint, but also from an employee issues standpoint. Why can't Sally get to work on time, and why is Johnny harassing everybody, kind of stuff. A policy and procedure standpoint, all those things that set the rules for the
Right.
employees, but also allow that business to expand and grow properly: handbooks and job descriptions, performance management. And then additionally, think of the last thing, like kind of the strategic or organizational development, how to get the right players on the team in the right
Right.
position, all working together. So those are big concepts, right, from a strategic advisory perspective. But then there are tactics underneath each of them that, when that business owner is released from that stuff, it allows them to focus down the road, looking out the windshield, rather than looking at the hood of the car.
Right. Exactly. So your services are very unique from an HR perspective, in that you're working within the organization more on the strategy and the procedures and right people in the right seat, right? Because there's fractional HR professionals out that just concentrate on the hiring, firing, employee handbook, right? Which I'm sure you do, but your real focus is on the strategy and getting the wheels turning within the organization.
Yeah, it's a combination of both, right? So for most small business leaders who came out of big businesses, these things were happening behind the scenes without them knowing,
Right.
right? So I'm assuming they didn't know, but so our goal is that first part is a real analysis of what the business, right? Advisory services. At a high level, here's what's going on. Here are the things that need to move better, right? And that's one level of service, if you will,
Right.
right? That's one. Then the second side of it is, okay, who's going to do it? And that becomes where the fractional piece comes in, that's executing on that plan that has been built. So it really has two components. The real value proposition for most business owners is that strategy piece, right? But then for small business owners who they want to execute on it, right? And they want to execute pretty quickly. There's a lot of things. So to do that, they'll bring us on in the fractional role to be the executor of those tactical things that plug into that strategy.
Right. And that is what makes your services unique.
Well, I think that, when I started this business in 2010, we were in the depths of the last Great Recession.
Right.
So it allowed me, and I couldn't, because it was an early period of time, I couldn't see what was real, why people were buying certain things, right? But as we came back out of that period and went into, let's say, more of a growth period, we saw why they were buying things and what the real value proposition was to them on both sides, right? The strategic and the tactical. And we built our entire model that way. And, quite frankly, we're seeing similar trends, buying trends from our clients, or problems that they're having, clients and prospects, this past 8, 10, 12 months,
right,
that are mirroring what we saw back in 2010 and 11 and 12. So I think that strategic and that combination of strategy and tactics is becoming even more of a value proposition than it was even a year or 2 years ago.
Have you experienced in these two periods a greater realization or appreciation for the fractional model? Because I think it's really exploding here in 2024, right?
Yep.
You started your business around the same time I did, when fractional wasn't really a thing, right? So can you kind of compare and contrast those two periods?
Yeah. So back then we called it outsourcing or consulting, right? That was a different term, right? Fractional, I think, is a reasonably new term in the last several years. But I think from a macro perspective of what's going on in the fractional world, we've seen this massive increase in supply of fractional providers in all fields, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we've seen a relatively constant, slightly growing demand for fractional outsource, that sort of thing, outside professional services. I think we're seeing that the supply is kind of rolling over. So those that got into it without a real intention of building a business, like CFO Your Way or Turning Point Human Capital Management, the struggles are becoming more apparent for them. So we're seeing a decrease in the supply. With that said, the last 3 or 4 years, the amount of people talking about fractional support has increased awareness for small business owners of what it is and how it could help them. So I think we're at a unique kind of crossroads where we're seeing a rolling over of supply and an increase in demand because of the conversation. So we're watching that pretty intently, and we're focused on it, because we think that because the business environment has gotten tighter, and I know we only have a minute or two left. The business environment has gotten a little tighter. The value proposition for businesses to outsource, fractionalize, all things that are not core to their business, right? So each business has a little bit different subset of that. I think we're seeing business leaders say this is a more economical way to get higher level help at a lower cost.
Right. It's economical, and I feel the value we all bring as a fractional who's been in business for more than 2 or 3 years is all of that experience from each and every one of our clients. Like we as the fractional service provider learned something from each and every one of our clients. And I always say, I bring the experience of every client to each client.
Yeah. And what I would say is, along those lines, for folks that are doing this, the value proposition, the market is not static, right? We don't have buggy whips anymore. We understand, right? The value proposition, that what we bring, ebbs and flows with what's going on at a macro level, right? So that experience with lots of clients plays into what folks like you and I do.
Right. Yeah, we have a whole encyclopedia of the things, the tools, right, and the experiences, and we pick the ones off the shelf that are applicable in the current client situation.
That's right. That's right.
So how does a company engages your services? How do you really move the needle for them, in the short term?
Yeah. Yeah. So how they engage us, what's interesting is we did a study a couple of years ago, and of the 2,000 businesses we've worked with, they were all referrals or what we call transfers of trust from 3,000 different partners. So mostly those 3,000 different folks are other fractional consultants, outsourced types of folks who have a client, and that client says they have a problem, right? And that person says, I know somebody, I know a firm, right? So almost all of our business exclusively has come from that model. So that's very interesting, and that transfer of trust makes it a different entree point, right? If you think of the game of double Dutch jump
Right.
rope,
Right.
we're coming in at a different place. So typically that's where it comes. Now, so that's how people usually find us, right?
Right.
The second part is, how do we start the engagement? And typically the engagement has, as I mentioned, has two components. It has a strategic component and a tactical component that have to align.
Right.
So the beginnings of that engagement start with that strategic analysis. Where are you? What's the problem? Here's the
Right.
plan. Here are the
What's
different
working, what's not working.
right.
Yeah.
Here are the different tactics underneath the plan that have to do it, and then developing that plan and then executing on it, which
Right.
generally turns into some sort of fractional engagement where we're doing all the things and building the plans and executing on the concepts that we
Right.
uncovered in the strategic
Right.
review.
Yeah, because the fractional model works, from a knowledge and a cost perspective.
Right resource,
100%.
right price, right time. That's what they always
Exactly.
say.
Yeah. And the ability to bend and flex.
And here's another thing that I think is just really important for many fractional firms, right? It is a team-based approach. So it's
Right.
not just one. When a business owner who's not really good at hiring and building out plans and building, right, when they hire somebody, they're basically hiring on a resume.
Right.
Right? They're not hiring on a behavioral style or incorporating that. So many times they hire someone because they're I don't know,
They
a
applied
car
for the job. Right.
right. They applied for the job. Their resume looks reasonable. They went to a high school that person knows. They went to a college that their brother or sister-in-law went to, and let's give it a shot. But
Right.
if that person is not truly hired right for that position, what do they have to do? They have to terminate them somehow,
Right.
which causes stress, anxiety. Whereas when you hire fractional firms or services, typically that could be replaced with another. There's not the danger, and most fractional firms have someone behind them that can, if that's not the right fit or that person leaves or whatever
Right.
it is. So it gives that team approach.
Yeah, it's the team approach, the continuity, and and again, it goes back to the knowledge base because you have a team behind you that if a client has a situation that maybe you haven't experienced yet, someone else on the team has.
Absolutely. So there's no monopoly on good ideas, right? So if
Exactly.
you think about the hiring of a person, right?
Right.
Every business owner has just invested that person has a monopoly on good ideas,
Exactly.
right? So if you have a team of people that are touching your account from different angles and such, it's less of a
Yeah.
monopoly and more of a, I don't know, what's the other word that's not a monopoly underneath it?
Right. Great minds, right?
Yeah,
Bring
yeah, yeah.
great
Right,
minds together.
right. A cabal.
Yes, there you go. Anything else before we wrap up that you would like to share with our audience?
No, I think that from a macro perspective, and I kind of touched on this a little bit. I think from other fractionals who are doing the things every
Right.
day. I think that there's something shifting right now in at the macro level, which
Yes.
means our value propositions will shift, the reasons our clients would buy will shift, and to be in tune with those things. And from a business leader's perspective, I think that, again, that from a macro perspective, what is changing and what is happening, how we did business 18 months or 2 years ago is changing.
Right.
Therefore, the opportunity for fractionals that remain as the supply dips,
Right.
as the demand increases, becomes a tremendous opportunity.
Absolutely. 100%. So, Rick, thank you so much for being here with us today. So much for our audience to draw from our conversation. And I invite our audience to reach out to you directly. Your website, turningpointhcm.com. They can find you on LinkedIn. And all those connections will be in the show notes for easy reach out to you. And I am sure you will be happy to have conversations with anyone that reaches out.
Yeah, and Cheryl, thank you for doing this. I know that the professionalism of CFO Your Way and what you all do there, everything that I just said, you live and apply directly. I know this to your clients from firsthand. So thank you, and I appreciate you.
Thank you. And I love it because, although our service is, in different silos within an organization, right? The way we interact with our clients and provide those services is very much parallel.
Yeah, you and I are selling the same thing. We're selling solutions to their problems.
Exactly. And we will end on that note. I love that. So thank you, Rick, for being here. And I'll see you real soon. And to our audience, thank you so much for tuning in. All of the episodes of Pathways to Profitability can be found on the website, either cfoyourway.com or pathwaystoprofitability.com. And thank you so much for listening in.
That's it for today's episode of Pathways to Profitability. Remember to ask yourself, where can I pay my success forward today?